So today we're going to continue developing the data pipeline that we've created in our previous demos. So just to recap on what we've done to date with this data pipeline, we've got a single source, which is pulling static data from S3. We've then got a transform, which is sitting on top of that and is doing SQL and generating an aggregate based upon a key. And then we've also got a sync where we're taking the output from the transform and writing out to a local file. And what we're going to do today is to add a new source, which is a streaming source, and we'll be describing what streaming source means in IOblend. We'll be then connecting that streaming source and the current static source up to a new transform, which will join it. And then we'll be adding or joining that new transform to this existing transform, and be adding a JDBC sync, which will then take the output from this aggregate and stream it out into a JDBC database in BigQuery. Right, so let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is drop a new transform. So let's do that. Let's give it an appropriate name. So let's call it trans group of sensor data. It's an internal subtype. And let's go in and enter the information required for the key value pairs. So let's give it a name, which is the same name as the playbook. And we'll just postfix it with table to denote that it's table. And then let's write the query. So as I mentioned, what we want to do is a join between these two existing tables. Let's expand this a bit. And instead of me typing it out, just let me copy the SQL from my handy script. We're pulling the device ID, the temp ID, the heart rate, and the created date from both those tables. We're also pulling the IOblend data lineage columns, which allow us to understand where the record has come from in terms of the file and which process created it and the time. So that gives us row level data lineage. And we're uniting the two tables in order to produce the join. Okay, so that's cool. Let's save that down. Okay. And I think that's everything. Yeah, that's cool. Right. What we need to do as well is just move these out of the way. So let's get rid of these dependencies, and then we'll move the trans ag sensor transform out of the way. So let's move that one. Yep. Again, to delete it, you highlight the dependency line, you go up to the delete icon, delete it. It asks you, are you sure you want to delete it? Press OK, and it's gone. So now let's move the trans ag sensor component out of the way, move it somewhere else. So if I click on the arrows icon to move it, click on the component, and then click where I want to move it, it'll move it for us. Let's move our new component into a better position over here. And let's also just change the run orders of these. So we're only running what we want to run and nothing else. So as described before, if we want the IOblend engine to ignore a component on the screen and not execute it as a data pipeline, we just have to set the run order to 0. So let's think, and let's set it for this transform for the time being. Okay, good. And now let's join up our transform to the two sources that it'll be pulling data from. So let's go to the dependency icon, click on it, and then click on the two components I want to join. Let's repeat it for the other component. And there we go. So if I now look at trans group, it should say, and it does, that it's dependent on those two objects. Okay, that's cool. Right, so that should be everything for us to be able to run this data pipeline and just have a look at the output which is generated. So because we've made changes to the data pipeline, let's save it before we execute it. Okay, and yes, it's saving all to the right place. That's good. And now to execute the pipeline, let's hit the run button. It's asking me, have I saved my data pipeline before executing? Yes, I have, so that's all good. And off it goes. So as explained previously, the first time you execute the run, the first thing that IOblend designer has to do is initiate the IOblend engine and also the Spark environment. So this is a job it has to do just once. It takes a little bit of time, but once it's done, then we can continue to change and modify the data pipeline without having to rerun this. So what it does while it's doing that, as explained previously, it just goes through and shows you what stage it's at within the processing with the setup of IOblend engine and also the Spark as well. And off it goes, pulling in the source status, doing the dedupes against them, outputting that data. It also does the event management because we've asked it to do that as well. And then it generates the two transforms. The first transform, which is the group, as you can see there, and the second one, which is the aggregate, which is the average of the heart rate, which is generated there. So that's run completely. So it's successful.